All right, I've started the stream here, so we'll see if that works.
Okay. Yep, it's live now. We're live on YouTube as of this moment.
All right. Let me get going on the other stuff here.
Okay.
All right, Vikings, Ravens. Preview. All right, Vikings. Oops, better keep that on mute. All right, we're live on Periscope.
All right.
I will get the links tweeted out.
Okay. Hey, guys, we're just getting set up here right now. So if you're in the Periscope or the YouTube chat right now, just give me a couple of seconds here. Sorry for being late today. We had some technical difficulties with the program. So unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter show today, but we'll try to cram in all the information that we've been working on and preparing for this show. We'll probably get set off here at about, I don't know, 30, 60 seconds or so. So if you have any thoughts or something like that you want me to talk about while Drew's getting the kind of the final stuff set up here, go ahead and throw that into the chat, and I'll answer whatever you guys have, or respond to any thoughts that you guys have. This is a good one off the bat right here from Lee_CVN72. He said, y'all think Newman can hold up the whole game at slot with Mackenzie Alexander out? This is actually something we're going to talk about, a little bit more in depth with the film review today, because Mackenzie Alexander has actually been considerably better than I think a lot of people are giving him credit for. But the short answer to your question is I'm curious about this question as well. We've seen kind of Newman sort of looks like he's lost a step this season. In fact, he's allowed the worst passer rating out of all Vikings cornerbacks this year so far. So I'm intrigued. I think that he's certainly capable of holding up, especially with all these wide receivers down for Baltimore. But at the same time, I am curious if he can play, a full game of snaps at this stage in his career. He just doesn't look like the 39-year-old Terrence Newman does not look the same way as 38-year-old Terrence Newman on film, in my opinion. So I'm curious about that too, man. I guess we'll see what happens. We got one from our guy Don Rio here. He says, "What's on Drew's chin?" I think he's referring to that little.
It's dirt.
It's disgusting. Are we? Yeah, we did not shave for this program today. Are we all set on Periscope? Is that live and everything?
Yeah, we're live there. So I'm just trying to get links out on Twitter and stuff.
Okay. Well,
do you have the VT Twitter info or no?
The VT, yeah, I do.
I wonder if you could get retweeted at least I can do that or something. Okay.
I can do that. Okay. All right, folks. Well, welcome into the About the Labor pregame show. If you were in for the pregame to the pregame show earlier, you heard me say that we were apologizing for having some technical difficulties, getting started a little bit late today, but we'll go right to the top of the hour at noon. Plan today is, as usual, we're going to preview the Vikings-Ravens matchup here. Talk injury report, the inactives for today. So if you just woke up, we'll catch you up on all that stuff. Then we'll talk about it a little bit. And I got 4 film clips for today that I want to go over. Like I just said before, Mackenzie Alexander is out today, so we'll talk a little bit about that and the type of impact that he has had, sort of subtly, for the Vikings defense, and also couple of big play guys for the Ravens, guys like Mike Wallace, who makes his return to Minnesota. We'll talk about his game-breaking speed and what type of difference he can make, especially with Mackenzie Alexander out and Trey Wayne's kind of in limbo to some degree and being forced to be out there even if he plays poorly today. So we'll see how all that shakes up. Let's start off with the injury report. Let's start with the Vikings injury report because it's not nearly as massive as Baltimore's. The inactives list for the Vikings, it does hurt. There are some names on there that you obviously didn't want to see. Guys like Stephon Diggs and Michael Floyd are going to be out, and then as I've mentioned before, Mackenzie Alexander is also out. So those are the 3 big guys. Why don't you give me the rest of the list, Drew, and kind of give me your thoughts?
Yeah, so we had Michael Floyd and obviously Mackenzie Alexander, and then we had Sam Bradford and Stephon Diggs, who we kind of we knew about those guys ahead of time. And then I think we should also mention too that Teddy Bridgewater is not He's not listed as inactive, but I mean, they have a certain number of weeks to officially activate him onto the roster, I believe is how that works. So he's given like kind of an exemption there, so he doesn't have to be listed as inactive, but obviously he's inactive for this game. And then Nick Easton at starting guard, also another starter that'll be out. Aviante Collins and Deshaun Bauer are the other ones. So Rodney Adams is active for the first time in his NFL career today. So that's kind of the big takeaway there. And obviously, I think you'll have Terrence Newman step up. You'll have probably Stacey Coley, a little bit at wide receiver, but Laquan Treadwell will have a big role today. So you'll have, and I'm sure Jarius Wright too will kind of get some action, but you'll have a lot of different guys stepping up today. And then I think Searles will also be your starting left guard again too.
Yeah. One more kind of some input to add to that on Rodney Adams. Not only is he active for the first time in his career, but it should be interesting. Let's keep an eye on who drops back to return the first kickoff for the Vikings today, because with Jerick McKinnon seeing an increased workload and not playing very well as a kick returner, to be quite honest with you, this might be the Rodney Adams debut returning kicks, or it could be Stacey Coley as well, who was also in the mix during training camp. I know that Mike Briefer was very high on his return ability as well. So we might see a shakeup on special teams today, just based off the fact that McKinnon's going to see an increased workload. And, the rookies might get the opportunity to star for the first time in their careers against arguably the best special teams mind in the game in John Harbaugh. So over to the Ravens inactives, who we got here, Drew.
Let's see. We have three receivers. Three of their kind of go-to receivers, Brashad Perriman, Chris Matthews, and Jeremy Maclin are all out today. Right. Terrence West, their starting running back, is out. Tim Williams, I believe, is he a first-round pick for the Baltimore? Yep. He's out.
Second round pick, I think.
Okay, second round pick. Matt Skura at guard and Max Williams, the former Gopher. Those are the inactives for Baltimore. So I did see it. I have to look at who their active receivers are today, but it's a pretty interesting list of who's available at receiver. Mike Wallace, who's actually still nursing, I believe, a back injury, and then Chris Moore, Griff Whalen, and Michael Campanaro. Those are the active receivers for Baltimore today.
So I am only familiar. I'm not saying familiar as in I know who these human beings are. I'm only familiar with two of those receivers, Griff Whalen and Mike Wallace. I have absolutely nothing to add on Michael Campanaro or Chris Moore was the other one. Was that the other guy? Yeah, I'm completely unfamiliar with both of those guys. Griff Whalen, I expect to be a slot guy, and then Mike Wallace, as we talked about on the most recent About the Labor podcast, is your take the top off the defense guy. I don't think I need to explain that after Vikings fans saw basically the only thing he did successfully and very rarely at that during his tenure in Minnesota. So let's just jump right into the film here since we do have a bit of a shortened show today. What do you want to start off with? Do you want to start with Vikings or Ravens?
You make that decision. You got it.
Okay, I'll make that decision. Let's just, since we're talking about Mike Wallace already, let's talk about Mike Wallace a little bit here. I threw this film clip in here today, not knowing whether or not Mike Wallace would play, and I think it's important either way because depending on whether or not he played or Brashad Perriman, the former first-round pick, this was an element of the Baltimore Ravens game that they may have to, kind of take out of the playbook with a lot of their receivers out. But with Mike Wallace still in there, they have arguably their greatest threat on offense. And, it isn't necessarily saying a whole lot that Mike Wallace is their greatest threat, but he is a guy that can be a boom or bust player, a guy that can hit the deep ball. And the Vikings cornerbacks have not been great over the top this season. So this is important. This is from this clip right here is from 2 weeks ago against Oakland. Obviously, this was against E.J. Manuel and co. The Ravens ended up getting a W in this game. We talked about this before on the podcast as well. This was kind of a shaky outing for the Ravens despite winning the football game. So here it is. Mike Wallace is at the top of your screen here. You're going to see him basically run a 9 route, and he's going to create separation off the line right there. You can kind of see him get off there, and then he's going to use his speed basically to get a couple feet of room, and Joe Flacco is going to drop in a perfect deep ball right here to Mike Wallace on the sideline. That's a 55-yard catch.
Yeah. That's not a shocker that Flacco threw a good deep ball there. That's pretty standard for him. So if he does get, his problem a lot of the problem with him has been getting receivers who can get that type of separation, and then getting the time and having a running game that is feared it's kind of, not that he's been very good. I still think he's kind of very below average as far as starting quarterbacks in the NFL are concerned. But that is one thing he does really well. And if Wallace is able to get a step on probably Xavier Rhodes or Trey Wayne's, one of the two, but if he's able to get a step, Flacco could probably hit him with that deep ball for sure.
Yeah, we saw this in Minnesota too with Mike Wallace, right? He tried to be a possession receiver in Minnesota. You saw him running a lot more in-breaking routes, 8 to 12-yard deep, when he was in Minnesota with Norv Turner, and that just didn't pan out for him. He's not that type of receiver, but he is still this type of receiver. I don't know, it seems like he hasn't lost a step in terms of speed since, when he was in Pittsburgh. Obviously, when he was in Pittsburgh, he was a lightning bolt, and he probably is kind of falling out of his prime to some degree, but he can definitely still run that 9 as well as anyone in the league here. This is not poor coverage by any means. This is just a matter of Mike Wallace being faster than his guy in man coverage and Joe Flacco dropping in, a perfect dime. Like Drew said before, that's basically the one thing that he has done at a high level throughout his career consistently. Throughout is Joe Flacco elite phase of his career. This is one part of his game that definitely has always been elite. Over to the defensive side of the ball for Baltimore here. Not a lot of playmakers on the side of the ball right now. Part of that is because of the injuries that we've been talking about all week. And part of that is just because a lot of these guys are old and they're just not that good anymore. I do think that they do have some playmakers at each level. CJ Mosley, the linebacker, Drew talked about him on Friday. He's a big player for sure. And then obviously Brandon Williams, the nose spot, is a big player as well. But the guy I want to talk about here is a guy we didn't talk about on the most recent podcast, and that's Tony Jefferson, the safety. What he does for me is very similar to what Harrison Smith is asked to do. He can play in the box and can also play zone coverage over the top. A lot of his best work comes inside the box, though. And this play right here, he's going to blitz off of the edge, and it's going to look like it's going to be disguised like he's lining up in man coverage in the nickel, right? But this play is going to be, EJ Manuel is not going to see this coming at all. As you see, he just basically comes the free runner off the edge right there, and Tony Jefferson's going to get that sack, easily. And this is a great disguise by the defensive coordinator here, and this is also just a great execution. So this is the type of thing, the exotic defensive plays that you will still see from Baltimore, despite the lack of talent, or I should say maybe lesser talent relative to what we've seen from Baltimore defenses in the past. This is still something they can do, and that's scheme well defensively.
Yeah, that's kind of been part of Baltimore for years now, is how well they scheme, how well they disguise things. That's still true despite not having maybe the playmakers or the talent that they have in the past. And this is still a good defense. It's just they're not as fast. Maybe they're not as I guess there's the speed's not there. They're not as instinctive, I guess, but they still disguise things really well. And I think they get it done with coaching more so now than they do maybe with having that extra talent like they did, 4 years ago when you had all kinds of Pro Bowl caliber players out there. But it's just they have a few guys that are a bit past their prime, and it does show at times. But they still, like here, it's able to disguise things, and the Minnesota offensive line will have another challenge there, because I think it's similar to the way Pittsburgh, there aren't a bunch of playmakers or like elite talents, but they disguise things well, and they put them in good positions to create some big plays.
Yeah, Tony Jefferson is just one of the playmakers on this team. He comes over from Arizona. Obviously, he was a Pro Bowl safety when he was with the Cardinals. So he comes over and he's having a pretty solid year with Baltimore. I kind of think that this defense for Baltimore sort of goes as Terrell Suggs goes. It's kind of been like that for a really, really long time, like going all the way back to the Ray Lewis era. Terrell Suggs you've kind of seen the defense peak and plummet as Terrell Suggs has played. When he misses a full year with an Achilles injury, that defensive ranking goes way down. And as he kind of gets older, you see this defense fall off, gradually. They've got good replacements. We talked about this on the most recent podcast. If you want to check out, tons of great rookies on this team, but a lot of guys that just aren't really ready to play just yet. But keep an eye on Tony Jefferson today. I think that he'll be an important player, and he adds a dimension to their defense that a lot of defenses don't offer. And you're going to need to basically going to need to scheme for him specifically, because he is a difficult mismatch coming from that safety spot. On to the Vikings side here. Let's start with Jerick McKinnon. This guy has been outstanding, to say the least. The Vikings have done a tremendous job stepping up the whole next man up mantra that just, all coaches say it, but most of the time it's not accurate. Like, it's just not true. Like, you can't say next man up when Sam Bradford goes down. And generally speaking, you're not going to expect a quarterback to play as well as your starting quarterback. But the Vikings have done a really good job mitigating and neutralizing the impact of some of these injuries. And Jerick McKinnon is a big piece of that. Part of the reason why he's been so successful, not just as a rusher, but as a receiver as well, is because Pat Shurmur has been designing some excellent play calls. And part of that for me has been the screen game. I think we talked about during the preseason how the Vikings screen game looked off. It just didn't look good. Pat Shurmur's designs and timing of the calls were not good. But we've seen throughout this year, during the regular season, that the Vikings screen pass attack has been much better. We saw that particularly last week. So this play right here, you're going to see a fake reverse to Adam Thielen that's going to it's going to move the safety over the top. You can see the safety kind of going with Thielen there, and that allows a ton of space. You can see that hole opening up on the right side of the field right now. And Case Keenum is basically going to wait till the last possible second as the pass rush closes in. You can see the blockers set up here, and Jerick's going to he's simply going to catch the ball, and then he's going to outrun the first defender. And that's all he really needed to do. The offensive line got in the way. They made blocks upfield. Jerick makes a couple of good cuts, and he goes in for 6. So this is a great design, great execution, and it's an example of a lot of different types of progressions. We've seen, progress from Jerick McKinnon, progress from the offensive line, and progress from Pat Shurmur in terms of play calling, timing, and creativity. So this is a kind of a microcosm of a lot of different types of improvements that we've seen from the Vikings this season.
Yeah, and I think Pat Shurmur has been really good in the last couple of weeks at getting McKinnon the ball in space, where he usually in his career he's kind of excelled a lot more in space than he has when there are big bodies around him. But I think Adam Thielen is drawing attention now at a much higher level than in the past. I think people are starting to kind of, other teams are starting to recognize how good he really is. That's part of how this play worked so well. Part of it too is just, Green Bay's in man coverage. So if you get 3 guys on the complete opposite side of the field,
right,
you're going to draw 3 defenders over there. And I think Pat Shurmur recognized that too. But it sounds like Thielen was just featured on NFL Today for some big story about how his story that we hear about every single week, about how he went from $500 scholarship to D2 school to.
Did you know that he's from Detroit Lakes and that he's a native Minnesotan?
Had never heard of that. They never mentioned that on TV.
Just dropping knowledge here. Yeah. So over to the defensive side of the ball for the Vikings, and we'll get into your guys' thoughts here. We've got looks like we've got some owning up to do. We got one question in here on Teddy Bridgewater. Fair take too. So we'll get to that in just a second here. This is the play. This is the Xavier Rhodes interception from last week. But the reason that we're talking about this particular play is the play that Mackenzie Alexander makes right here, and to kind of recognize what he has offered to the Vikings defense so far this year, and sort of try to understand what him being out means for the Vikings here. So obviously Xavier Rhodes gets the interception here. He makes the play. He shows up in the stats book, but this is a play that Mackenzie Alexander makes, right? He follows his man. You see him right there during the pre-snap, follows his man in man coverage, back over the middle and then back over to the right side of the field. And basically he goes man coverage, jumps the route, and he's going to make a great tip and pop that ball up in the air for Xavier Rhodes to make a play on it. So this is something that Mackenzie Alexander has done well pretty much all year long, quietly. I think a lot of people kind of wrote him off after last season, and then coming into this year, he didn't look too good in training camp or during the preseason. People were very nervous about him. But as of late in particular, the last 3 games against the NFC North opponents, Alexander has been basically lights out. Playing at a very high level, and this is just a great, simple example of something that he's been able to do out of the slot for the Vikings, and something that they'll be missing today against the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 3 to 4 cornerbacks that you can trust in man coverage, despite no matter who you're going up against on the other side of the ball, you can go do a lot of man coverage, a lot of man blitz stuff, maybe cover 0, cover 1. That's what the Vikings, they're in cover 1 here, and they simply just trust their guy, whether if it's, I think Wayne's on top of the screen, Rhodes on the bottom of the screen. They trust their guys to lock them down, and then they can, in that way, get the pass rush to Brett Hundley here. and they trust Alexander to make this play. This is a relatively easy man-beating route here, just a little quick out, which out of the slot is very difficult to stop because you have, the sideline is not really there for you to help, whereas the outside it's kind of there to help you. So this is a tough one to stop, and Alexander does it well. He makes a deflection, and then Roach is there for the pick. But he's gonna be missed today because I believe then it'd be Newman in there, which that could be a problem. But I think it's evened out by the Ravens receiving core today that we really haven't heard of besides Mike Wallace. So
right. I like the point that you made about the cover one. This is an example of Mike Zimmer basically lining up his guys and saying, hey, my defense is better than your offense. We're going to beat you off the line of scrimmage in this critical situation, and we're going to win the one-on-one matchups across the board. That's essentially what a cover one is going to do. It's going to force their athletes to beat your athletes. And the Vikings, Mike Zimmer in particular, is very confident in his cornerbacks. He always has been through the peaks and valleys, that is. And this is a primary example of Mike Zimmer basically saying, you know what, I've got Xavier Rhodes. I trust Mackenzie Alexander in the slot. Trey Waynes has, for what it's worth, maintained pretty good coverage throughout the year, just hasn't made the play at the point of attack. And it works out for him. This is a play that in general probably going to lose this one a lot of the time because man coverage across the board means if the play is extended beyond basically 3.5 seconds, you kind of expect coverage to break down at some point. But for the Vikings here, excellent coverage, excellent pass rush. This is a defense. This is a team defense, cohesive play right here. Just everyone working at each level to make this play to get the Packers off the field. So that's what we're looking at today. No Mackenzie Alexander. We'll see how that impacts the Vikings. Terrence Newman, as Drew said, is probably the favorite to gain those snaps. But Trey Waynes might move into the slot as well. That could be interesting, something I'm a little bit nervous about.
I'd rather not see that happen. But
I would rather not see that happen either. But yeah, so, basically this kind of the simple fix here is don't get beat over the top by Joe Flacco and keep everything in front of you. And you
make Flacco go through his progressions. If you make him stand around the pocket while it collapses and you force him to wait things out, I feel like he's one of those that has an exaggerated kind of speeding up of the internal clock where it speeds up faster than it does for most quarterbacks, kind of like an Eli Manning, if you will. So get after him, make him go to a second read, and then I think you'll get some positive results.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll finish up the show here with any thoughts that you guys have. If you want to kick them over to us from YouTube, Periscope, Shindig, or whatever, we'll answer those for the next.
Let's start with this one in this one in our Shindig one about Teddy because it's a fair take, and we've both, at least so far, it looks like we're going to be wrong about this, but I'm
okay with that. I got it.
Right? Yeah, okay. I published it. So since both of you told me that Teddy wouldn't see the field this season, what is your updated prediction as to when we see him? So yeah, we both failed on that one. But do you have a prediction there?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think that our take on Teddy Bridgewater as a duo here was really fair for what it's worth. I'm not I'm ready to admit that I was wrong about Teddy Bridgewater seeing the field this year. That's fine by me. But coming off of that injury, I thought that was the most objective take at the time, trying to give,
It was.
I thought that it was the right take at the time. And Teddy has basically he's performed a miracle, essentially. There's no reason he should have seen the field this year. With Sam Bradford lined up at quarterback, Case Keenum playing well through adversity, there was no reason that we should have ever seen Teddy Bridgewater, and yet here it is.
Right.
As for an updated prediction, it sounds like they're eyeing Week 10. That's what I've heard. I still think Week 11 makes the most sense. Week 11 against the Rams at home.
Yeah.
But I would say keep an eye starting on Week 10. I think that's the first potential time you could see him. But I think that Week 11 is probably
that's what Rappaport for NFL Network reported today.
Okay, well there you go.
It looks like Week 10 is what they're aiming for, but I personally would keep him out of FedEx Field's turf as his first game back. But who knows? I always kind of thought it was ideal that, or an ideal situation would be to go to London next week, blow out the Browns by about 30, and then get Teddy some game reps there in kind of garbage time. But I do think a home game against the Rams is probably the most likely scenario. And I mean, everything has kind of fallen into place for this to work for Teddy, which
is, I mean, is this
the
not
Bradford injury? Yeah,
is this not a 30 for 30 narrative?
It is.
Like,
it is.
If the Vikings find a way to make the postseason alone, that's a great story. With Teddy as the quarterback, that's a great 30 for 30 narrative. If they somehow make a run here in this
with
wide open NFC
in Minneapolis,
I mean, this is setting up for the ultimate 30 for 30 story, the ultimate first Super Bowl victory, the ultimate everything. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but yeah, I mean, my updated prediction that he is going to play, and you know, I'm still shocked. Let's keep it that way. I'm still shocked, and I'm very excited as well. Huge Teddy fan. Love the story. Love the narrative, and I'm really excited to see him get back out on the field here. So this isn't necessarily.
We got a comment here on Periscope
Okay.
from @nriley2401. I feel like the game against the Redskins makes sense because he's been practicing, and it gave him about 3 weeks. So I mean, I think week 10 makes sense. And maybe I'm overreacting to the turf at FedEx Field, but
I don't think you are.
That's just. I mean, RG3 would agree with me, I think. So
that's a reasonable concern, but at the same time, I think that in terms of a timetable, week 10 is the perfect time, right?
Oh yeah, after a bye week for sure.
Right, and you know, there have been a lot of reports as of late that Teddy has been doing a whole lot more than has been reported in the past. Like basically in secret, he's been working with his teammates, doing a lot more than kind of the camera has caught. Let's put it that way. So he might be ready to roll like right now. And it's just a matter of the Vikings kind of easing him into the role.
Andrew Kramer at the Strib this week said that, I think when people were asking questions on Twitter, he responded once with, you know, the Vikings, if they activate him, they're not going to keep him as a backup. So if they're activating him to start him, which I thought it was a bit surprising given, you know, Case Keenum is he's doing well enough to win games. I think it definitely can be improved, the quarterback position, but and that's we just got a question. We just got a question about that too. So, you know, I mean, if the Vikings are 6-2 and maybe they win at Washington and they're 7-2 and Teddy's ready for week 11, do the Vikings keep Case in there given a 5-game winning streak, or do you bring Teddy in?
Okay, I want to say right now, I understand the merit of this debate. This quarterback debate is so much better than the Teddy versus Sam one over the summer, where we weren't arguing anything with evidence. This has concrete evidence. There is a case, no pun intended, for each side of the argument here. I am full on the Teddy Bridgewater train. I think if he's healthy, he's your starting quarterback. You play him. At the same time, Case Keenum has done a hell of a job. I think he's kind of Josh McCowning to some degree. I think you could see, you know, a quarterback needy team potentially, you know, overpay him to be, you know, more than he is. I'm just going to put it out there. I still think he's a backup quality quarterback that has basically played out of his mind twice. And then we've also seen the backup level play in the past. So I think that there's going to be a debate regardless here. Mike Zimmer is when he makes the move to go to Teddy Bridgewater or to go back to Sam or whoever it is, there are going to be people who are going to say stuff like, well, the Vikings should have held on. They should have kept going with Case. We were winning. All this stuff was happening. But he's your starting quarterback. He's your franchise icon. He gives you the best chance to win in terms of, you know, talent and ability. He's a former first-round pick for a reason. Everyone in the organization believes him and is behind him. I see absolutely no reason to keep Teddy Bridgewater off the field, even if Case Keenum continues to win football games. Wins is not a stat, period.
See, no, I am like behind. I'm the conductor of the like anti-QB wins train, but I feel like there's a rhythm on offense that could be disrupted by throwing Teddy in there, probably you know, severely rusty, and you know, and again, I definitely believe Teddy Bridgewater is a better player. That's not what this is about. It's about, you know, Pat Shurmur developing a groove with Case Keenum at quarterback. It's about the offensive line understanding the tendencies of Case Keenum in the pocket, the running game. I mean, there's a lot that factors in here besides just putting Teddy in and his talent, because we know he's more talented for sure. But I do think Keenum. The thing about Keenum is that he's playing well enough to win with this roster. But, you know, if he had been on the other two rosters he's played on with Houston and St. Louis or Los Angeles now, he's not winning a lot of these games. So
if he is in EJ Manuel's position in Oakland with that defense, a mediocre defense that has, problems in the secondary, he probably doesn't win a football game. That's my opinion. I think that Case Keenum has played very well. The weapons around him have really helped him. Pat Shurmur, as you've said, and we've been talking about all season, is having one of his finest seasons as a play caller, in my opinion. That's definitely benefiting Case as well. There's an argument for both sides. We started off this conversation by saying that I'm okay with either quarterback. I like both these guys, but at the end of the day, I think that you got to shake the rust off at some point. And if your goal is to win the Super Bowl, you probably want to shake that rust off during the regular season. So I expect Teddy to be in there sooner rather than later. I think the team is probably in a similar mindset, but we'll see what happens there. We got a comment here. This is kind of just an update, something we didn't talk about at all. Jeremy Maclin, the Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, is out with an injury. We got that message is from Todd Wilhelm on the YouTube channel here. I just wanted to just quick touch on that because Jeremy Maclin is a big name player. He's probably a lot more a name recognition player at this point in his career after a bunch of injuries and, kind of getting older and just seeing the general regression that we get from players. But at the same time, he's a player that offers a lot of different things. He's a very good possession receiver. What do the Ravens lose by having him out today?
Well, I think reliability, kind of comfortability. That's not a word.
Something.
A level of comfort for Joe Flacco. He's kind of your. I mean, really, he's an Adam Thielen in that offense where you trust him to get Jarius Wright, maybe too, kind of the guy that you trust to get to the first down marker, make himself available, find a soft spot in the zone, that type of thing. Macklin's always been good at that. And I think it's just now he's going to have to trust guys. He probably hasn't even played a game with some of these receivers. I mean, I don't think he's the chemistry there with Griff Whalen and Michael Campanero and Chris Moore probably isn't great. So the Vikings should be able to take advantage of that quite a bit. And again, I'm pretty low on Flacco as it is. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think that Jeremy Maclin is a great loss for this team strictly because of the replacement value, right? If Jeremy Macklin's in there, you probably don't see Michael Campanero today.
Right.
And basically, who Jeremy Maclin is. You don't know who Michael Campanero is. I think it kind of explains itself. It's a big loss because of the situation that the Ravens have and the situation that they're facing in the Vikings, who cover very well in their secondary. So I would say it's a big loss, and I guess we'll see how that plays out. But I'm certain that Ravens fans would rather have Jeremy Maclin in there than not.
We got a comment about Stacey Coley on Periscope. Just how much do you expect him to play, given that he's probably wide receiver 3 or 4, depending on how, because if Adam Thielen's in the slot most of the game, I don't see Jarius Wright getting a ton of time, which means Coley would be the third receiver and the outside with Treadwell on the opposite side. So I don't know. That's kind of what I see happening for the most part. Obviously Wright will mix in, but I think Coley could be, I think he and Wright will be wide receivers 3, A and B, or like wide receiver 3.5, both. I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
Well, here's my thought on Stacey Coley. You loved the Diggs to Stacey Coley comp. You threw that out there across the summer, and it's pretty accurate for the most part. They're very similar types of receivers. Diggs in 2014, I believe, made his debut in Week 6 against Denver. Yeah,
2015.
So 2015, yeah, Week 6. So similar situation here where the Vikings against Denver back in 2015. For whatever reason, I always get those draft classes mixed. But this is a similar situation for Stacey Coley as Stephon Diggs had, where the Vikings are down a couple of receivers. They need him to make a couple plays, and I think it's going to be a hot hand situation where I think that initially you could probably expect about 10 snaps for Stacey Coley, something similar to what we saw last week. But if he starts catching a couple passes and we see him get into a groove, like Drew said, you could see him replacing Jarius Wright throughout the game. So this is for me, this is a hot hand situation for him. So he could see anywhere from 5 snaps to 25 snaps. And we'll see how that plays out. But I'm very confident in the ability of Stacey Coley for sure.
I think it's a little bit, it's unfortunate for Jarius Wright in that he's been a niche slot receiver forever. And now Adam Thielen has kind of taken that role. And the thing about Wright is so good at the slot. Like, he's got the shiftiness, the savvy, just like the experience and knowing how to get open and make yourself available, that he'd be a very good addition for a team that needs a slot receiver. But the Vikings have multiple guys ahead of him on the depth chart that can do both, that can go inside or outside, Thielen and Diggs specifically. So it's unfortunate for Wright that that's how it's worked out, and that his his career has kind of been hit, or his talents in the slot have been hidden by that. But the thing is, the Vikings have better guys in that role that can be a threat everywhere else. So it just by default, that makes him kind of lower on the depth chart. And I think Coley can play both slot and I would say Coley's probably the better guy to have out there. But again, Wright does have talent. It's just not as versatile.
And Wright has been kind of old reliable as he gets to this stage in his career where, early on in his career, there was
if Thielen were to go down today, I would it would not be as big of, it wouldn't be that big a deal because Wright could step into the slot and produce at, not obviously not at Thielen's level, but at a very good level still.
For what it's worth, if Thielen were to go down today, and only today, if we lose him moving forward, that's a real problem. Just for some clarifying purpose, I could totally see someone commenting, what do you mean if Thielen goes down, we'll be fine? We're screwed. No, just whatever.
Yeah.
So let's finish up the show here now with our score prediction for the game, and kind of, your expectations for how this thing's going to play out, starting with you, Drew. If anyone else in the Shindig or YouTube or Periscope has any final thoughts that you want our comments on, we've got about 8 minutes left here, but what the plan was to finish up with the score prediction. So why don't you give it to me, Drew?
I'm going to go Vikings 24, Ravens 9. The Ravens are just completely overmatched in this game. The Vikings can play a pretty average football game today, and they should handle the Ravens pretty well. I'm not high on Joe Flacco. I'm not high on these, JV receivers that he's going to have available to him. If the Vikings have to play pretty badly, and some things will really have to tumble for this to be a close game, in my opinion. And I don't think that's me being biased. I think that's just me looking at the rosters and seeing the difference in talent.
Before I give you my score prediction, I want to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors here. That's Shamrock's Irish Pub. Make sure to check that out. It's downtown St. Paul. Excellent atmosphere for a game. Phenomenal burgers. Make sure to check out the Michael Floyd burger in particular. It's fantastic stuff there. They also do shuttling to both Wild games and Vikings games. Make sure to check out that Shamrock's Irish Pub, downtown St. Paul. The address there is 995 7th Street West, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55102. That's Shamrock's Irish Pub. And so for my scoring prediction here, I'm going to stick with what I said on Thursday when we were recording. I got 23-6 Vikings, and the reason why I think this is because Justin Tucker is the best football player on the Ravens, in my opinion. He's going to get all 6 of their points. I don't see this offense that Joe Flacco's leading, able to consistently drive down the field. I think the only way they're able to get 6 points is if they're able to hit a big play, or, with Terrence West out at running back, if Javorius Allen, Buck Allen, I guess, is able to get on a roll, maybe something like that. But I just don't see this offense being able to do much against the Vikings defense that has been stout against the run and sufficient in coverage throughout the year so far. So I think this is a game where this is the first game of the season. I said this to Drew before the show. It's the first game of the year where I really expect the Vikings to win this football game emphatically. I expect this to be a decisive victory for the Vikings today. I think that we'll see, I don't want to take them too lightly just simply because that seems to bite the Vikings in the ass in the past, but I do think the Vikings have an opportunity here to, playing at home against a decimated roster, you're rolling offensively and defensively, coming off of a big win last week. The Vikings need to win this football game, and I fully expect them to by a wide margin here. 23-6, Vikings win the football game. So that is
wrap it up.
Yeah, that'll wrap it up for today. Once again, we apologize for the technical difficulties that we had earlier in the show. That should be figured out by next week. We'll be back as always with another pregame show, another film breakdown ahead of next week's game as well. You can check out the podcast about the labor on VikingsTerritory.com. As always, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio. If you're on YouTube right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll be back for the roundtable after the show, after the Vikings game today, featuring everyone from Vikings Territory that will be available there. Yeah. So thanks again for joining us, folks. And we will catch you either later on today for the roundtable or tomorrow with the rapid reaction show. Thanks again.